Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Hallelujah. At this time, we're going to go ahead and get ready to start our service. At this time, we're going to ask everyone to stand to their feet as we begin to turn and face towards the east and look towards Jerusalem. We're going to have the blowing of the shofar by our chief elder, Aliyahu, and immediately after we will have prayer by Aliyahu, and we will go into our teaching. So at this time, we're going to have the blowing of the shofar by Aliyahu. Hallelujah. Shabbat shalom, Mishpachah. Hallelujah. We thank Aliyahu, the Father, and His precious Son, Yashra'al, to be the atoning sacrifice for the nation of Yashra'al, to bring us back into covenant relationship with the Father. And today's lesson, Hallelujah, we are going to continue a theme and a lesson we've been doing for the previous 5 weeks or so, but our focal point for the last couple of weeks has been circumcision and the importance of having an understanding of circumcision of the heart versus circumcision of the flesh. And the reason this is important is because the nation of Yashra'al they were once in a covenant relationship with the Father. Something happened in which that covenant was broken. And when that covenant was broken, something happened with the nation of Israel, the nation of Yashra'al. So let me explain something right quick. When you hear, because we have visitors today, when we say Yashra'al, we're saying Israel. That's the Hebrew pronunciation. If you hear say the Ruach, that's the same meaning as when you hear the people in church say the Holy Spirit. When you hear say Yah or Yahuwah, we're speaking of the Father. That's his Hebrew name. That's his name. When you hear say Yahusha, you hear some people say Yeshua, but the Hebrew name, the correct name is Yahusha. So, want to give y'all an understanding of that, just because you hear say some terms that you might not be familiar with. Because I don't know how long you guys have been in the walk and how much of the Hebrew you've heard. So to keep from losing you in the teaching, we just want to make reference to that, and so give you a heads up. So when we say these things, you'll know what we're speaking of. And so we see there was a covenant made with Abraham. This was pre-law, before there were any laws as far as what we have called the book of the law. He entered into covenant. He entered into covenant with Abraham. But before entering into covenant with Abraham, he had already made Abraham the promises that would befall him and his seed, being all of his descendants. That was made pre-law. When I say pre-law, I'm talking about after the sin of building or making the golden calf. That's when they broke the covenant. So after they built the golden calf, now death was required for the party that broke the covenant. That's why he instituted a system and allowed Israel to start making sacrifices, because instead of Israel dying, now they had to slaughter and sacrifice all these animals on their behalf to keep them dying. So the importance of that is, when we go back to the covenant that was made with Abraham, remember, the Most High let a deep sleep fall over Abraham. And when the meats were cut in twain, both parties are supposed to what? Walk between those pieces when a covenant is made. But we notice with the covenant with Abraham, Abraham didn't walk between those pieces. But something else happened. What happened? Anybody know?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, there was a what? Flaming what? Lamp of fire that walked between those pieces. But when we go back to scripture, we find out that that flaming lamp was none other than Hamashiach himself. So now the covenant states that whoever breaks the covenant, or whoever walked those pieces, they're saying, what they're saying is, if this covenant is broken, I will be responsible for what? Taking on the death positioning or paying the price of death. So Hamashiach, being called the Lamb of Yahuwah, remember he said a lamb was what? Slain before the foundation of the world. That's very important. A lamb. So when we get to the Messianic teachings of what we call the New Testament, how does John or Yehukanan the Immerser introduce Hamashiach? He said, behold, the Lamb of Yah, which what? Taking away the sins of the world. The Lamb of Yah. The Lamb. Very important. Now, when we go back to this Abrahamic covenant, remember, the promises were granted pre-book of the law. The promises were granted pre-circumcision. Before Abraham entered in, was required to circumcise his flesh and all of his sons and their male servants, he had already been promised the inheritance, and promised what? His seed will be what? As the stars of heaven and the sands of the sea, they will be innumerable. So, what we want to focus on is what's taking place or what's going on with Abraham at that time. Because what we're going to see is there's something very important that Hamashiach, or the Messiah, had to come and do for the nation of Israel. What did he have to come do? Because remember, this same lamb is going to be spoken of in the book of Revelation. When we go to the 19th chapter, what is the 19th chapter about? The marriage supper of the Lamb. That's very important, because this same Lamb is going to take us all the way back to what? Isaiah 53. And we're going to see that this same Lamb is what? The suffering servant. But our focal point is circumcision for a reason, because it plays a big part of what this Lamb came to do for the nation of Yashra'al, or Israel. And we have the other lessons and videos up to that date this one right here, because it might be hard to follow what you just come in on this part of the lesson, but the other parts, But you feel free afterward. You have any questions, or you can call us or talk to us anytime to get more explanation, to get a more thorough understanding. And what we need to see is, and the first thing Israel needs to know and see is, before the book of the law, what we call Torah, do y'all not know there was a Torah before the book of the law? It was called what? The Ten Commandments are the book of the covenant. Think about this. Book of the law and why it was given, and book of the covenant and why it was given. Book of the covenant, which was given at Sinai, was a marriage ketubah, or a marriage contract or agreement. That was 10 commandments. But this particular covenant or Torah was broken. By it being broken, now he had to institute something else and give them something else. That's very important. Always know the 10 commandments that we call them is the original marriage covenant or marriage ketubah or marriage contract or agreement that Israel entered into to be the bride of who? Yahuwah. That's very important that we know this. So, without any further ado, let's go and read some. We're going to look at, let's go back to, let's go to Jeremiah, Aliyahu 31 and 31. And another thing is, pay very close attention to the Pauline, or what they call the Pauline epistles, or the epistles or writings or letters of the Apostle Shaul, who we call Paul. His teachings seem like they are contrary to everything Israel has been taught, don't they? To the point where they always accuse them of what? Not keeping or following or adhering to the law. What does the Apostle Shaul know that the others don't know? That he's trying to bring them into an understanding? There's a reason why the Apostle Shaul keeps pointing people back to where? Abraham. Why? Why is his focus so, and what is so important about Abraham that Apostle Shaul keeps directing and pointing people back to Abraham? Yeah. Now let me ask y'all something. Because when it comes to the Torah, you don't find it strange that Torah is very difficult. When I say the book of the law, or the law, statutes, and commandments given after the sin of the golden calf, it's very, very difficult to keep. Am I lying? Why is that?
Because you can't keep rules and laws in someone else's.
We're in captivity. And Yahuwah's laws, no matter how righteous they are, they cannot supersede the laws of another kingdom that's ruling over his children. Yahuwah's laws say it's wrong and it's a sin for two men to lie together. But the laws of the kingdom that rule over us say it's okay for two men to marry. Am I lying? Now, go against that written law in the United States of America and see what happens. Do y'all understand why Hamashiach said you cannot serve two masters? Either you're going to love one and you're going to do what? Hate the other. But let's go back and look at the original covenant. The 10 that he gave the nation of Yashra'al, what we married under. What is called the 10 Commandments. Is it one of those commandments that we cannot keep, even in captivity? Name me one that we can't keep. you can keep every last one of them. You ever ask yourself why? Why is that? Now think about it. Somebody might say, well, we have to keep the laws and statutes and commandments. Really? I said, think about this. This is because even with the Moreh, even the feast days, we see Paul going back to Jerusalem to keep the feast days and everything. But let me ask y'all something, and I'll shock y'all with this. And I know some of y'all never thought about this. Were the feast days pre-book of the law or before the book of the law, or did they come after the book of the law?
Came after the book of the law, right?
Before. Passover was kept where? In Egypt, and all the rest were kept where? Unleavened bread in the wilderness. Before the book of the law. They were pre-book of the law. Somebody said, well, the dietary laws, were the dietary laws pre-book of the law, or were they after the book of the law? They were before. How do we know? Did not he tell Noah to take the unclean animals on the ark in groups of 7 and take the unclean in groups of 2? Why would he distinguish the difference between unclean and clean? The only reason he would do that for consumption's sake for Noah and his family. If you're going to eat meats or clean, these are the clean animals, take them in groups of 7, but don't eat these unclean, take them in groups of 2. That's the only reason you would distinguish clean animals and unclean, for the sake of consumption. To consume, to eat. So do y'all see how much stuff is pre-book of the law versus post-book of the law? If this is my focus, I'm trying to get you to see something. Our focus is on the wrong thing. That's why they keep talking about the letter of the law. That's why if you break one, you're guilty of breaking them all. We will never be able to enter the kingdom for that if that's the case. That's why he said the law is to be what? A schoolmaster and a tutor or a teacher to Israel until the time that the promised seed should come. Until, operative word here, until. I know it seems like I'm going off on a tangent, but I have my reason for this. Let's go. Let's go to Jeremiah 31:31.
Yirmiyahu, or Jeremiah 30, verse 31. Behold, the days cometh, says Yahuwah, that I will make a new covenant or renewed covenant with the house of Yashra'al and with the house of Judah.
All 12 tribes.
Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Mizraim or Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was an husband unto them.
Stop right there. Which my covenant they break. Although I was a what? Husband to them. What was the covenant that they broke?
10.
It was the 10 Commandments or the book of the law. And what way did they break it? Idolatry. And what's the very first commandment? Thou shalt not have what? No other Elohim before me. Or no other husband. They done took on another husband. Do anybody know what Baal about all means? It means Lord or husband. And what was the main deity Israel always got in trouble for worshiping? Baal or Baalim, because many different Baal deities. So what we see here, the very first thing he commanded them not to do, which is the first Torah he gave them, that's the very first act they committed. As no sooner than he entered into a marriage covenant with them, they broke it. But what did he say? I'm going to make a new covenant. Did he say not say it? So if that covenant was broken and Abraham himself received the token of that covenant, which was what? Circumcision. So if circumcision is the token or the entrance, and when I say circumcision, I'm talking about circumcision of the flesh, that was the token of that covenant or the entrance into that covenant. So if the covenant itself has been broken, what are you going to enter into? There's nothing to enter into if the covenant has been broken. So now when we read in the scriptures, and we go back to Joshua, and Joshua said what? Before they enter into the land of Canaan, the land that was promised to Abraham, what's the first thing the Most High tell Joshua to do? Take all the males, Israel and the servants, and do what? Circumcise them. And why did he tell them to circumcise? Did he not explain to them why to circumcise? He said because 40 years they went without what? Circumcision. They went 40 years without circumcision. Why did they go 40 years without circumcision? Where were they those 40 years that they went without circumcision? In the wilderness, the same place they what? Entered the covenant and then broke the covenant. Was not circumcision required for Passover? Circumcision is a part attached to Passover. So if someone wasn't circumcised, guess what they couldn't do? They couldn't partake in the Passover festival or feast. So how is it possible that they went 40 years without doing it and know that it wasn't required? And it tells you what? The mighty men of war, those that left out of Egypt and were in the wilderness, what did the Most High do? He consumed them. He killed them right there in the wilderness. But during that 40 years, you had young males that grew up and became men through that 40 years in the wilderness. So they had to be circumcised now because circumcision now has become, it went from being a token to enter into the covenant. Now it has become a token or a right to enter the inheritance or the land. They had to circumcise before they could enter into Canaan, which became later known as what? Jerusalem. So, when we see that, we have to understand what happened. What's so important about this covenant? That now, all of a sudden, it has gone from circumcision is required to the people that entered the covenant, broke the covenant. Now 40 years, they don't circumcise anymore. Let's go to, let us go to Genesis 17 and 11 on. Genesis or Bereshit 17 and 11.
Bereshit or Genesis 17 verse 11. And ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant between me and you. Okay, did it say it shall be the covenant or a token or sign of the covenant? But not the covenant. Okay. And he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man child in your generations, he that is born in the house or bought with money of any stranger which is not of your seed. Okay then. Now let's go to Hebrews, the 7th chapter, verses 11 and 12.
Hebrews 7, 11 and 12. Hold on. Let's start at verse 1. We'll go from 1 to verse 12. So pay very close attention to this.
Hebrews 7 verse 1. For this Melchizedek king of Salem, priest of the Most High, Elohim, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, or baruched him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being by interpretation king of righteousness, and after that also king of Salem, which is king of peace. Without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto Son of Elohim, abideth a priest continually.
Stop right there. Now, let's get some understanding of what's going on right here. Because we know this Melchizedek priest at this time is who? He had a name.
Shem.
It was Shem.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we go look at the Zadok, or we go look at the Melchizedek, or the Abijah, or the Melchizedek priestly order, what's going on here is not saying that Shem was without mother or father. We know Shem had a father. Who was Shem's father? Noah. Was not Noah of the Melchizedek order as well? So what did it mean that he didn't have mother or father without the beginning or ending of days or whatever? I'm paraphrasing now. Does anybody know what that's saying? What's going on here, as you heard Moreh, Senior Moreh, Kasadaba speak of, and I mentioned in one lesson about, you have two priesthoods when you read the Hebrew scripture that are running simultaneously at the same time. You have the Melchizedek priesthood, who Hamashiach, Yahushua, has brought us back unto our original priesthood, which is the Melchizedek order, and you have the Levitical priesthood at the same time. And guess what you will find with the Melchizedek priesthood? Because remember, with the Levitical priesthood, guess what they had? And they had to have? A written record of the lineages and who you descend from to be of that priesthood. And the Melchizedek priest, their lineages or whatever would not have been found where? In the records of the Levitical priesthood, because they were not of that priesthood. Does anybody understand what I'm saying? Let's see why that would make sense. Anybody don't understand or have a question about it? Because I don't know if I explained it thoroughly or broke it down enough for everybody to understand. Go ahead, Coach.
So when it tells us that priesthood, it's like a lineage.
Uh-huh.
You're coming from that family. But Levitical, you can actually be appointed to be a priest.
But you have to be son of who?
Of
Aaron.
Abraham.
Uh-huh.
Right. So Levitical, you could be a different priest, but Melchizedek, one person is selected from that lineage.
Right. You'll see it go all the way back to Adam to Seth and move all the way up. Methuselah all the way through. You'll see a Melchizedek order. These were righteous men who were not what? All of who were not Israelites, because Israel had been birthed at that time. But they were of a righteous priesthood or Melchizedek order. And a lot of times when you see the word Melchizedek or Melchizedek, all it means is what? King of righteousness. And you have different men who were of that righteous order, who Yahuwah himself chose to be the priest of that order. And one day we'll go through the whole list of Abijah. You'll see all of the kings or all the men that were chosen. So That's very important to see, that when you read that, it's not saying that Shem didn't have a mother or father. No, their records and names were not recorded amongst the Levitical order of records from the lineages of the priests and high priests that came down through Levi. Go ahead, my bad. I didn't mean to go off there, but I need to explain that.
Hebrews 7 verse 4. Now consider how great this man was, unto whom even the patriarch Abraham gave the tenth of the spoils.
So who is he talking about? How great this man was? Who is this great man?
Melchizedek?
Yeah. So Melchizedek being who at that time? Shem. Being Shem.
Verse 5. And verily, they that are of the sons of Levi, who receive the office of the priesthood, have a commandment to take tithes of the people according to the law that is of their brethren, though they come out of the loins of Abraham. But he whose descent is not counted from them received tithes of Abraham and blessed him or baruched him that had the promises.
Stop right there. Was that not a whole lot spoken right there? Go back and read those last two verses again.
Hebrews 7 verse 5. And verily, they that are of the sons of Levi.
That are of the who?
The sons of Levi.
Sons of Levi.
Who receive the office of the priesthood.
Of the priesthood.
Have a commandment.
Have a commandment or laws.
To take tithes of the people according to the law that is of their brethren, though they come out of the loins of Abraham.
Though they come out of the loins of Abraham.
But he whose descent is not counted from them receives tithes of Abraham and baruched him that had the promises.
But he whose descent is not counted from them received tithing of Abraham. So what's going on here? Somebody help me out. You have one group who are called what? Israelites, who were given what? A law. The high priest or the priest would what? Receive tithe according to the law from this group of people called what? Israelites. Read that last verse again out.
Hebrews 7 verse 6. But he whose descent is not counted from them received tithe of Abraham and baruched him that had the promises.
He whose descent, Shem, being not from who? Being not from the loins of Abraham, but Abraham was from what? The loins of Shem. Did what? Receive tithe, and what?
And baruched him that had the promises.
And baruch, a favor, or in English they said bless him that had what? The key word here, operative word is what? Promise. What was that promise? Was this promise pre-book of the law, pre-circumcision of the flesh, or post-circumcision of the flesh and post-book of the law? It was pre-both. The blessings were already declared to him. And we're going to get deeper into that a little later.
So
Go.
now you see the difference. And 5 says commandments and laws. And then 6, it says the promise.
The promise.
So it makes the distinction.
I'm going to tell y'all the importance of this Abrahamic covenant. This is why Hamashiach gave his blood. That's the only way the nation of Yashra'al could be brought back into covenant relationship with the Father. Our Messiah, and y'all know I'm using that word lightly because we really don't use that, but for the sake of our brother and sister, I'm trying to use terms that they can be familiar with. So, what happened is through his blood and through the cutting of his flesh that we are counted what? Of the circumcision. And was circumcised through the cutting of his flesh. And we're going to get into that a little later on because we're going to actually read this. But you have to see what's going on here. Okay, let me let my Chief Elder here finish reading.
Hebrews 7 verse 7. And without all contradiction, the less is blessed of the better. And here men that died receive tithes, but there he receiveth them, of whom it is witness that he liveth. And as I may say, and as I may so say, Levi also, who received tithes, paid tithes in Abraham. For he was yet in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. If therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood.
Stop right there, hold on. Y'all, do me a huge favor right here. Pay very close attention to what Zazakan is about to read in this verse. Go ahead, Zaza.
Hebrews 7 verse 11. If therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need was there that another priest should rise?
Stop. Read that one more time. I want to make sure y'all get this.
Hebrews 7 verse 11. If therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood.
If perfection was by the Levitical priesthood.
For under it the people received the law.
For under it the people received the law. What law is it talking about the people received? Because they received a law before the Levitical priesthood called the what? The Ten Commandments or what? The Book of the Covenant. But what did they receive after that covenant was broken? The Book of the Law. Now let's read it again, though.
Hebrews 7 verse 11. If therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need was there that another priest should rise after the order of Melchizedek, and not be called after the order of Aaron?
Y'all. If perfection was what? Well, by the priesthood or the Levites,
Right.
they were given the law. So if perfection came by that, what need would there be for another priesthood?
Exactly.
After the order what? A Melchizedek order.
Yep.
But let's keep reading, because there's a need for a Melchizedek order.
Hebrews 7 verse 12. For the priesthood being changed, there is made of necessity a change also of the law.
Stop right there.
Yes, Moreh.
For the priesthood being changed, there is made of necessity a change also of the law. What change took place with the priesthood? Through the death, burial, and resurrection of Yahushua HaMashiach, our Messiah, guess what? Remember, in John, HaMashiach spoke something very important to Yehukanan and Mercy. Remember when Yehukanan was when HaMashiach or the Messiah was asking John to immerse him. And what was John's argument? He said, I have need what? That you should be immersing me. But Yahushua HaMashiach explained to John that No, that all righteousness be fulfilled, you need to immerse me. And what was this righteousness? Remember, Yahuchanan the Immerser was a priest, high priest at that time. But also you had Caiaphas, or someone of the Levitical order, who was high priest in the land. And two high priests cannot hold office simultaneously at the same time. Why wasn't Hamashiach immersed from a Levitical priest? He couldn't. He had to be immersed or inaugurated of Yahuchanan the Immerser, because he was the, what? Melchizedek or Melchizedek priest at that time. And once he immersed Hamashiach, guess what he did? He transferred the power and the authority to become the Melchizedek high priest. Do y'all hear me?
Yeah.
That's why. And once he did that, now let's go back and read that last verse, Elder.
Hebrews 7 verse 12. For the priesthood being changed, there is made of necessity a change also of the law.
What was the change of the law? Somebody help me out. Since there was a change, what? In the priesthood, went from, now the priesthood is being back transferred where? From the Levites back to the Melchizedek priesthood. The Melchizedek priesthood were not confined to what? Levitical laws. What is the change of the law?
No sacrifice went from the book of the law back to the book of the covenant.
It went from the book of the law back to the original covenant that we were brought up under, or that we married into. That's why everything, you notice when we start, everything is pointing back to Abraham. Then it goes to the book of the law. Then it transfers to the book of the law. Now it talks about a priesthood. Now we're being transferred to something else. The law is being changed. That's very important, y'all. Go ahead, sir.
Hebrews 7 verse 13. For he of whom these things are spoken pertaineth to another tribe, of which no man gave attendance at the altar.
I love the scriptures explain this stuff. Y'all just keep reading. This man was from a whole, this priest here from a whole nother tribe. That's what we're talking about. It won't tell us what tribe he's
Oh,
from.
yes it is. Here it comes.
Verse 8 is getting juicy.
Verse 14. For it is evident that Hamashiach sprang out of Judah.
He sprang out of what?
Out of Judah, of which tribe Moses spake nothing concerning priesthood.
Concerning priesthood. That you know you weren't going to be no priest from the tribe of Judah.
Not out of Judah.
Not under the Levitical order.
Oh, no.
But this priest sprang out of the tribe of Judah, and he had to become what? High priest under what? The Melchizedek order.
That's right.
Go ahead.
Verse 15. And it is yet far more evident, for that after the similitude of Melchizedek order, there ariseth another priest.
Ooh, let's keep reading. Because this thing fair for the,
Yeah.
just going in there.
Who is made not after the law,
Who is not made after what?
after the law
What law?
of a carnal commandment,
Who is not made after the law. What law is he talking about? The Levitical law.
That's right.
Read that again, bro. 17, 16.
60, yep. Hebrews 7 verse 16. Who is made not after the law of a carnal commandment, but after the power of an endless life. For he testifieth, You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek.
Not after the order of the Levites.
After the order of Melchizedek. For there is verily a disannulling of the commandment going before the weakness and unprofitableness thereof. For the law made nothing perfect, but the bringing in of a better hope did, by the which we draw nigh unto Elohim.
The law made what?
Nothing perfect.
But what did it say after that?
It brought a better hope, by the which we draw nigh unto Elohim.
But the bringing in of a better hope, to which we draw nigh unto Elohim. Go ahead.
Verse 20. And as much as not without an oath, he was made priest. For those priests were made without an oath, but this with an oath by him that said unto him, Our sovereign swear and will not repent, you are a priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek. By so much was Yashra'al HaMashiach made a surety of a better testament.
So that testament is the same word that gives you what?
Covenant.
Covenant. By a better covenant. So now you see HaMashiach come to do what? Bring about a new or a better covenant? Because remember, we broke a covenant that what? Need to be repaired. We were no longer under that covenant. Go ahead, Al. (7 and 22).
22, right. Verse 22, by so much was Yahushua made a surety of a better testament, and they truly were many priests, because they were not suffered to continue by reason of death. But this man, because he continueth forever, have an unchangeable priesthood, wherefore he is able also to save them to the uttermost that come unto Elohim by him, seeing he ever liveth to make intercession for them.
So, it says, wherefore he is able to what? To save them to the uttermost that come unto Yahuwah the Elohim by him. Come unto the Father what? By him. Why is he saying come unto the Father by him? Didn't he say no man come unto the Father but by me? And if you enter in any other way, you what?
A thief and a robber.
As a thief and a robber? But how were the Yahudim or the Pharisees in the land at that time? How were they trying to go to get to the Father? You ever notice they always pull what? Circumcision? Abraham called what? Circumcision was attached to the Abrahamic covenant? They always use circumcision as a way to get to the Father. But he said, no. No man comes to the Father but by me. The only way you're going to enter into the covenant relationship again with the Father, you're going to have to go through me. Go ahead, Doc.
Hebrews chapter 7, verse 26. For such an high priest became us, who is set apart, or holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners, and made higher than the heavens, who needeth not daily, as those high priests, to offer up sacrifice, first for his own sins, and then for the people's. For this he did once, when he offered up himself.
That's a lesson by itself, but I ain't even touching. Y'all get it.
Verse 28. For the law maketh men high priests, which have infirmity.
Stop right there. Now, that's heavy. Read that again, up.
Hebrews 7 verse 28. For the law maketh men high priests, which have infirmity. But the word of the oath, which was since the law, maketh the Son, who is consecrated forevermore.
Read that last one more time.
Hebrews 7 verse 28. For the law maketh men high priests, which have infirmity.
Which have infirmity. That's sickness, that's moral fertility, that's disease, that's weakness. This is what the law does. Go ahead.
But the word of the oath, which was since the law, maketh the Son, who is consecrated forevermore.
What is the word of the oath?
Book of Covenant.
Book of the covenant. Remember the Most High sworn out of his mouth, he made promises in an oath, what? To Abraham. He says, by the oath sworn out of my mouth. Do y'all see what we're getting at?
Hallelujah.
Now, let's go to Romans 2 and 25. Romans or Roma 2:25. It's Roma for some of you Greeks. Let's start at you know what? Let's start at verse 20 and go all the way down to 26.
Romans 2 verse 20.
Matter of fact, we'll just go from 20 all the way down to 29.
Gotcha. Romans 2 verse 20. An instructor of the foolish, a teacher of babes, which has the form of knowledge and of the truth in the law. Thou therefore, which teacheth another, teacheth thou not thyself? Thou that preachest a man should not steal, dost thou steal? Thou that sayest a man should not commit adultery, dost thou commit adultery? Thou that abhorrest idols, dost thou commit sacrilege? Thou that makest thy boast of the law, through breaking the law, dishonorest thou Elohim? For the name of Elohim is blasphemed among the Gentiles through you, as it is written. For circumcision verily profiteth if thou keep the law. But if thou be a breaker of the law, thy circumcision is made uncircumcision.
Circumcision profit is what? If you keep the law. But if thou be a breaker of the law, what?
It is made uncircumcision.
Your circumcision account what? As uncircumcision. Keep going.
Verse 26. Therefore, if the uncircumcision keep the righteousness of the law, shall not his uncircumcision be counted for circumcision? And shall not uncircumcision, which is by nature, if it fulfill the law, judge you, who by the letter and circumcision does transgress the law?
Now that's heavy. Read that again. I don't think y'all really just heard what that said.
Romans 2 verse 27. And shall not uncircumcision,
uncircumcision,
and shall not uncircumcision, which is by nature, if it fulfill the law,
if it fulfill the law, if the uncircumcised fulfill the law,
judge you, who by the letter and circumcision does transgress the law? For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Jew, which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the ruach, or in the spirit, and not in the letter.
Stop right there. You have to read that one more time for me.
Okay.
Help me to understand.
Romans 2, verse 29. But he is a Jew, which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of Elohim.
That's a mouthful, y'all. Do y'all see what's going on? Read what I'm saying. You have to know what Hamashiach Yahusha did and is doing for the nation of Israel. It sounds like Apostle Shaul or Paul is preaching against the law, don't it? Or saying something totally contradictory to the law. Listen to me, y'all, out there by way of Facebook, YouTube, or what have you. Circumcision is required. But it's required of the heart. He wants to cut the foreskin of your heart. Which is your what? Your mind. Your spirit. That's what he's trying to change. That's why it's very important we understand what Apostle Shaul is saying. We have to see what Hamashiach is doing. Because we got another scripture I want to get to, but I've kind of lost my place here. Let's go to Philippians 3 and 3. Not Philippians, Philip. Yeah, Philippians 3 and 3, I believe it is.
Yes, sir.
Philippians 3, verse 3. For we are the circumcision which worship Elohim in the spirit and rejoice in Yahushua HaMashiach and have no confidence in the flesh.
Read that one more time.
Philippians 3, verse 3.
Philippians 3, verse 3.
For we are the circumcision
For we are the circumcision,
which worship Elohim
which worship Elohim
in the spirit.
in the what?
In the spirit.
Pay attention to this last phrase. And we don't have any confidence in what? Read on.
In the-
You know, go ahead on.
And rejoice in Yahushua HaMashiach and have no confidence in the flesh.
Keep reading.
Though I might also have confidence in the flesh, if any other man thinketh that he have whereof he might trust in the flesh, I more circumcised the 8th day of the stock of Yashra'al or Israel of the tribe of Benjamin, in Hebrew of the Hebrews, as touching the law of Pharisee. Concerning zeal, persecuting the church, touching the righteousness which is in the law, blameless. But what things were gained to me, those I counted loss for Hamashiach. Yea, doubtless, and I count all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Yahushua HaMashiach, my sovereign, from whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and do count them but dung, that I may win Yahushua HaMashiach.
Stop right there. And what verse you stop on then? 8. On verse 8. Okay then. we're going to pick back up at verse 8. Now read verse 8 one more time for me.
Philippians 3, verse 8. Yea, doubtless, and I count all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Yahushua HaMashiach, my sovereign, from whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and do count them but dung.
Y'all know what dung is? Doo-doo.
She said crap.
Crap.
Doo-doo.
Said no.
Go ahead.
I have suffered the loss of all things, and do count them but dung, that I may win Yahushua HaMashiach, and be found in him, not having my own righteousness, which is of the law.
My own righteousness, which is a what?
Of the law, but that which is through the faith of Yahushua, the righteousness which is of Elohim by faith, that I may know him, and the power of his resurrection, and the fellowship of his sufferings, being made conformable unto his death, if by any means I might attain unto the resurrection of the dead, not as though I had already attained, either were already perfect, but I follow after, if that I may apprehend that for which also I am apprehended of Yahushua HaMashiach.
That's good right there. So what we see is Apostle Shaul, Apostle Paul is saying a whole lot here. But you see his focus is on what? Faith, the spirit. Circumcision of what? The heart. We see all of this for a reason. Why is he speaking of faith? Why is he talking about the promise? We see all of these things because faith, the promise, all of what? Operative words can point us back to one direction. To the Melchizedek order of covenant, which was made from Yahuwah to Abraham and passed down to his descendants. There's a reason why you see Apostle Shaul so strategically do this. Because he's trying to point the nation of Yashra'al back to the original. And this lesson is going to have to go a little deeper too, because I got to go back. But I can cover that when we go into some other lessons about the suffering servant. Even talking about why was there a crown of thorns placed upon Hamashiach's head? Were they just jokingly doing this out of the blue? They thought it was cute? Or did it serve a purpose? Because remember when I first started this teaching, I started it out where? In Adam, or what we call the Garden of Eden. And what did Hamashiach, the Most High, declare to Adam when they were exiled out of the garden? What did he tell Adam that were coming from the earth?
Thorns and thistles.
Thorns and thistles. How does that relate to the crown of thorn being placed on his head? Remember I told you the Most High was doing two things? He's restoring something or repairing something that had happened in Adam or Eden, and yet at the same time, simultaneously restoring his bride, the nation of Yashra'al, or Israel. That's very important. That's why I said we have to go all the way back to the beginning to get a thorough understanding of what's going on before we can even begin to tackle Isaiah 53, speaking of the Lamb of the suffering servant. So you should be able to see from the lesson thus far, Hamashiach is fulfilling and doing a whole lot. That's why he said what? Everything we're reading, it bear witness or testify what? Of him. That's why I have to keep going forward, then stepping back, moving forward, then jump back. Because I have to bring all of it together to get us to a certain point. Because circumcision is key to know what's going on with the covenant and how it relates to the land. Did they just beat him with a cat of nine tails and to rip him open for what? Any reason? Or was it divinely designed to do that? So if he said our body is the temple, and when we see the physical, when he said the veil or the curtain was cut in twain, apart, would that have reverence or be relevant to Hamashiach? And when you see the cutting of the foreskin, and you see the blood, and a cutting or a parting or tearing away of the foreskin, would he not be that veil? Would his flesh not be that cutting away, that what? Cut in twain to what? Why was the veil split or cut in twain? What was behind that veil? It was the set apart places. Where did Yahuwah reside? In the set apart places between the wings of the cherub. Who had access to that place? Only the high priest. But now Yahuwah has done what? Changed the priesthood. Now through his son, he has opened up and made a way for what? All of us to come before the Father's presence and be what? Back in covenant relationship with him. Through the tearing and the parting of his son's flesh, the shedding of his blood. That's why he said, take you this what? Cup and drink you all of it, for this is my blood, which was what? Shed for the new covenant. But at this time, we're going to bring this to a close, and I'm going to say Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. And we will pick up with this when? Next Shabbat. So at this time, I am going to open the floor for comments or questions pertaining to the lesson. I know y'all. Hallelujah. The floor is open. Go ahead.
So, wasn't Yochanan your mercy? From my understanding, he was from the line of Aaron. And like you were saying, the priesthood was changed when he immersed on Mashiach. So wouldn't it be indicative that if he was from the line of Aaron, like you said, he was a high priest at the time, the Levitical priesthood being changed over when he immersed on Mashiach back to the Melchizedek priesthood.
Because you got to remember, who was the high priest at that time?
I would say either Ananias or Caiaphas.
It was Caiaphas. So what happened with Caiaphas when Hamashiach made declaration that he was what? The son of Yahuwah or whatever? And he counted himself to be equal with Yahuwah? And what did Caiaphas say? He stood up and he accused him of blasphemy. And what did Caiaphas do? He ripped his priestly garment. That's key. What the law said for any priesthood under the Levitical order. What happened if they ripped their priestly garment or it's torn? Does not the law say that to be put to death? And it disqualifies them from being high priest? It got so bad, what did the Most High do? He commanded them and instructed them to do what? Make armor or a garment of armor to put over their priestly vesture to keep them from ripping it and tearing it apart. So they wouldn't have to die. So, when Caiaphas rips his priestly garment and he shouts blasphemy, automatically That was the end of the Levitical order. And now you have what? The Melchizedek order of priesthood in its rightful place over the rightful people, Israel. Because one has disqualified himself and is no longer qualified to be the high priest. But you know something strange what happens? Caiaphas yet lived in the rightful high priest of the Melchizedek order. What happened with them? Did they not put him to death? You see how they went against what was written in the law? Because remember, we just read about what? The letter of the law did what? It made men priests who were what? Morally, what?
Sick.
Weak, fragile, sick, or infirmity. Or moral fragility. Fragility. So, you also got to remember, when we talk about the Zadok king, you remember the sons of Zadok? You remember they were totally different from the Aaronic priesthood. Because you know the Aaronic priesthood had went astray and went awry. But you had Zadok, the sons of Zadok. Now all of a sudden, you have what? Some people that want to stand righteously for Yahuwah and follow after what Yahuwah has established and said. So when you find the Zadok king or the Zadok, you can trace that righteous priesthood all the way back to where? And you'll see those Zadokites of the Zadok king, now they fall where? Under the Melchizedek.
That's what Moreh was talking about last week.
Huh?
That's what Moreh was talking about last week.
Oh, okay, yeah. And so it's very important to see and understand what's going on there. Because that's why I'm telling y'all, when it comes to the scriptures, I don't know how to get my family to see this. And when I speak of my family, I'm speaking of you guys. When you see little things like that when you read in the scripture, when you see or hear how Mashiach tells something like John, you know, that all righteousness be fulfilled, I need you to immerse me. That should raise a red flag. You say, okay, what's going on here? Why is he saying that? When he tells Peter, if you don't allow me to wash your feet, you can have no part with me in my Father's kingdom. What's so important about me washing your feet that if you don't let me do it, you can't take part with me in my Father's kingdom? What takes place in the Father's kingdom? Remember I talked about Revelation 19, the marriage supper of the Lamb? If you understand Hebrew culture, you see the importance of the washing of the feet. But most people read this stuff and it goes way over their head, and it means everything is key for you to understand what's going on in the scripture. And that's why it's my goal and my job. I was speaking to Abad, I said, I don't know if I break stuff down. I said, I try to do my best to break stuff down on a level that you all can receive it and have a thorough understanding. And I hope I'm able to show you how Mashiach and what he's doing in the scriptures. And a lot of times as a teacher, you know, you say things, you go home and I wonder if they got it. Do they really understand what I'm saying? And I pray to you all the time, not to be deep or to be deeper than anybody else, but what he has given me, I'm doing a thorough enough job that you can come in and you can receive it and leave with understanding. You know what I'm saying? And so that's my aim. And when I do these lessons, I try to bring the big picture into a smaller nuance where you can see the big picture and on a more like a Cliff Note version and understand it. Because there's a whole lot going on in the scripture, but all of it brings you back to the same thing. It doesn't take you out in one direction and leave you there. Everything brings you back to perspective, and it's the center of the whole book, which is the marriage between the nation of Israel and Yahushua HaMashiach. And through that marriage, we're able to what? Be back in covenant relationship with the Father. And that's my goal, that's Moreh my goal, and that's what we labor like we do, to make sure we can, present a lesson or some way you can see these things. And, that's our goal. So I hope I am doing that and breaking it down and getting you to see the bigger picture, what's really taking place and what's going on. And I love the epistles of Apostle Shaul. He had a tough road to hoe. Because when you're going against the grain, when you're in a land and you're going against the grain, you got to fight. Don't you know Apostle Shaul had to be teaching a heavy message and he was upsetting a lot of people? Do y'all know how many times they threw rocks upside this man's head? One time they were trying to throw him over a cliff. Apostle Paul said, well, why am I still being persecuted? Preaching the law. But what law was he preaching? He did everything to appease the Judaizers or the Pharisees. Because he had a bigger picture. It was to show the people something. Hey, do you really understand what our Mashiach did for you? Do you understand the importance of him giving his life, shedding his blood? Even in one of his epistles, he talked about in Hamashiach's death, we're what? Circumcised. That's very important. Circumcision is required. But which circumcision is required? That of the law or that of the Melchizedek order? Which is the faith in Yahuwah. The spirit of what? The law. So at this time, any more questions before we bring to a close and adjourn? We're going to open the floor up to our visitors. We have visitors. We thank the Most High for our brother and his Akoti coming out to visit. Well, come on, let's give him a hand. Do y'all have anything you want to comment or say, or just want to introduce yourselves, whatever? The floor is open to you.
My name is Yashra'al. I felt like I was definitely missing some things, but my basic understanding was we had I don't know how to say this, but different like circumcision, different laws, different ways to follow the law, and he like circumcision was one, and then like he said the cutting of his flesh. So I feel like those were different ways. He gave us a chance to follow the covenant, and it's like I feel like he said, it's not the physical of the circumcision. It's more so the mind and your faith behind it. And that's what I did get. Like I said, I definitely will keep coming in and get a better understanding, but I feel like I'm missing things. But that's what I did get. That's what I did get.
Hallelujah. Come on, let's brother.
My name is Yashra'al. I've been in the truth for about a year. I'm still learning, coming here. So I brought him here today. It's kind of crazy how we ran into each other. I haven't spoken to him since 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so all praises to the Most High for bringing him here. Hopefully my sister and her husband can come next time so we can all, get the word together and congregate.
Hallelujah. So we thank the Most High for that. We want to say thanks once again for coming, sharing with us and fellowship with us. We really appreciate you. We're glad you chose, to come visit and fellowship with us today. So at this time, we want to come on. Let's give our Chief Elder Zarza Can a hand for reading so beautifully for us, and I really appreciate it. I don't think people understand how helpful it is to have somebody to stand beside you and help, even though reading seems like it's something simple, right? But you got to have the right person reading. It affects the way the person who's teaching flow. So I think that that's a gift of his. He's an excellent reader, and I love it, and it makes my job teaching so much easier because he can read, and he reads in a manner, in a way where it can keep your attention and keep you focused, and it allows me, because sometimes while he's reading, I need to be looking at something in my lesson to have me prepared for when he stops. I can make sure I can continue to flow and go into this. But when you got people stumbling over word and there are 45-second pauses in between words and sentences, it really messes you up and takes you out of the flow, and it's difficult. But I thank the Most High for Big Bro here, and because it makes my job, Moreh Kasadaba's job, much easier to do. And come on, let's give our senior Moreh Kasadaba Yashra'al a hand, even though he's not here with us today. He talked so beautifully last Shabbat and the Shabbat before too, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he talked so beautifully a lesson on the constellation and it was awesome. And thank the Most High for it. And we really miss him when he's not here. We appreciate his teaching and the word that he delivered to us to help us to continue to grow. And at this time, if there's not any more questions or any more comments, we're getting ready to stand. We are going to have the blowing of the shofar 7 times by our Chief Elder Zakeh and Aliyahu, and we're going to face the east, and Aki Slow-Mo is going to pray us out. Hallelujah.
Dear Aliyahu, I just want to come and praise your set-apart name. Thank you for another wonderful lesson by Moreh Aliyahu on the Shabbat. I thank you for letting us all be able to make it here, and for us to have the camera so that we can stream it online for the people to watch it online. For the ones who couldn't make it here, I pray that they'll be able to make it here next week, and that you keep us through the week and keep us safe and keep us out of harm's danger. And I pray that you write Moreh's lesson in our hearts and our minds so that we have a better understanding, that we may commit it to memory and understand it. Pray that you watch over us the rest of the day and keep us, help us to remember to stay set apart. In your set apart name, Aliyahu.
Hallelujah.
Big brother, bigger brother.